Welcome and thank you for tuning into the Forward Play podcast. I am, as always, your host, Michael Castrogano. Joining me this week, a familiar face and voice to Pirates fans, on-field reporter who just wrapped up his 11th season with the Pittsburgh Pirates, Robby "The Body" Incmikoski. Thank you for joining today. How are you doing?
Well, Michael, I've never been referred to as the body, but I guess I'll take that as a compliment any any which way. But yeah, doing great here. Just hanging in there, hanging out here at my house in Pittsburgh, and recovering from triple hernia surgery that I had 3.5 weeks ago. So it's been quite eventful for me personally, but everything's all is well right now and
Okay,
on the
well,
mend
glad you're
and
doing
doing a
better.
lot better.
Didn't even know about that. Got to be careful
Yeah,
doing jumping around with those
yeah.
baseball players.
I know it was it was adventurous. I'd never had hernia surgery before, so now when I see a baseball player, any athlete, um, when I see that they have undergone hernia surgery, I know what that experience is like and how hard it is to recover sometimes from it. Because it was a rough couple weeks, but the last week, thankfully, has
Jeez, I can
been very
imagine.
very smooth.
Well,
No
I
problems at all.
appreciate you making time to talk ball with me
So
today. We're going to talk Pirates, obviously, but first
yeah,
I
no
want to
problem.
talk about your road to Pittsburgh. From Philly, graduated Temple University, degree in elementary education, pivoted to radio and communications, jumping around the country,
Mhm.
worked in Arizona for a few years, Minnesota, finally landed in Pittsburgh. So I'm really interested in the transition from education to sports reporting. But talk to me about what those experiences were like for you
Yeah.
as you covered a litany of different sports over the years.
Yeah, that's been a lot of fun, and I consider myself very fortunate, Michael, to have had the experience of working in all four major sports. It started for me when I was a kid. I used to be a ball boy for the Philadelphia Eagles growing up because I grew up right there in South Philly, right in the Stadium District, and I still have family that lives in the Stadium District right there, about a half a mile from the old Veterans Stadium. And it was pretty cool. The reason I pursued education, so I worked as a ball boy, and then I worked in the training room, the athletic training room, as an assistant with the Eagles. And then when I went to Temple University for college in North Philadelphia, I worked. I was doing that while working with the Eagles, and then at Temple they wanted me to leave my job with the Eagles, which I was not willing to do. And my mother was an elementary school teacher for a couple decades when I was a child growing up. So I wanted to follow my mother's footsteps. So changed my major to education. And then my coordinating teacher, when you're getting your degree, you have to
Right.
you have to do a semester of student teaching. And the unique part about that was my cooperating teacher that I worked with was my first grade teacher. So that was kind of cool on the education side. And then coming out of that, I had still kept my job working with the Eagles in the training room, and I just um, pursued that career for a while and decided it was something I didn't want to do anymore. So I worked with the Eagles, and I spent a season with the New York Jets in 1996. And then at that point in time, I figured I want to get into television. So I had a couple friends that worked for the NFL and Fox, and they helped get me in. A guy named Kurt Menefee, who's the
Yep.
host, still is to this day of the NFL and Fox pregame show, and a guy named Brian Baldinger, who is now famous for his Baldy's breakdowns on Twitter,
Yeah.
X, I should say, and does work for the NFL Network now, and has been covering football games, and played in the NFL for 13 years, and has covered the game now upon his retirement from playing. He's been doing that now for probably about 27 years, 28 years, something like that. And they got me in the business, and it got me hooked. So I worked for the NFL and Fox for a while as a production assistant, doing remote production, traveled from city to city, working different jobs. I was a stats guy. I was a runner. I was a spotter. I worked side by side with the late, great Pat Summerall when he was partners with Brian Baldinger in the 2002 season. So that was really what turned me on to television, and made me want to pursue it as a business. And then being a hockey fan, a lifelong hockey fan, um, transitioned from working at the NFL and Fox, got a pre and post game radio host job um, in Arizona with the Arizona, then called Phoenix Coyotes, currently known as the Arizona Coyotes. And I worked with them for a year. Then I went and did play by play in the minor leagues for a team called the Arizona Sundogs in Prescott Valley, Arizona, which is about 90 miles northwest of Phoenix. And did that for 2 years, came back and got my first job in TV. Was doing some work with the Coyotes and the Phoenix Suns as a freelance reporter for what was then known as Fox Sports Arizona, which is now disbanded. Um, it was Bally Sports Arizona, but they have
Mhm.
ceased operations. So while I was in Arizona, the job opened up in Minnesota, covering the Minnesota Twins as the primary job in the Minnesota Timberwolves in basketball. So I did the Twins full time for 4 seasons, 09, 10, 11, and 12 in the summer. And I did the Timberwolves in the winter. Did 3 years, and a couple months into my last year is when I moved to Pittsburgh. Actually, today is the 11-year anniversary of for me living in Pittsburgh. So it's been a pretty cool ride, and just finished my 11th season with the Pirates here in 2023. So it's kind of been a very interesting ride. You know, you get to know athletes in all four major sports, which is kind of cool. And you know, I love baseball. Been a baseball fan my whole life, and love the game. Love covering the game. Obviously, been doing it 15 years, 4 with the Twins and 11 with the Pirates, and it's landed me here right now. So it's
Yeah,
been a pretty
definitely
interesting
seems
journey
like
along the way.
you have that energy and that enjoyment. Now, 2023 with the Pirates was another rebuilding year for an organization seemingly rife with them. But the team had a strong start and a number of highly touted rookies debut. What have you seen in your discussions with players and personnel that gives you optimism in this rebuild being successful?
Well, I think the biggest thing is looking at Key
Hmm.
Brian Hayes and Brian Reynolds. Uh, they both wanted to stay in Pittsburgh, and that was the first sign that I think they saw things were turning. You know, you saw the Pirates, you know, make a commitment that they don't typically in their history have made, and they made they made an 8-year commitment to Hayes, going to take him through 2030, and then they make a 6-year commitment to Brian Reynolds. So that was the first thing, and I know Mitch Keller has expressed a desire to
Yeah.
stay in Pittsburgh long term as well. Uh, so when you start to see those things happen, and then you see how they kind of piece together um, other parts of the roster into strong points with the development of O'Neill Cruz. Obviously, they didn't sign Cruz; the Dodgers did, but Neil Huntington deserves a lot of credit for that particular trade in getting O'Neill Cruz for two
Yep.
months of Tony Watson back in 2017. So you nailed down three positions, and you have an all-star starter in Keller, and obviously, there's a lot of they've got a lot of work to do. Ben Cherington has a lot of work to do. Derek Shelton, obviously, with the rotation now with Johan Oviedo, it appears he's going to be out, all next year um, with Tommy John surgery. But I don't know. I just think when you kind of look at it all, you look at the development, you look at the development of Cruz, you look at the development of Endy Rodriguez, you look at Henry Davis. Obviously, there's some work to do in right field for sure. Nobody's going to argue that, but the guy works as hard as anybody. He's a hell of a hitter. He works as hard as anybody I've been around, Henry Davis does. And I think, when they put a challenge like that in front of him, he embraced it. I thought that was, pretty neat to see and pretty interesting to watch him work as hard as he did, especially when the Pirates would play in a city for the first time when Henry would, the amount of time he would spend with outfield coach Tarek Brock in just kind of learning the field, learning right field, learning how fields play. I just think when you look at the way they're putting everything together, the bullpen, kind of flipped over during the season with the exception of Holderman and Bednar. Uh, they ended up finding some steals. Like Ryan Baraki ended up being a
Yep.
nice little piece who they locked in for next year. Um, just the philosophy, the way the team is run, the way the coach is coached. I just think they're putting this team in position to have success, and I would not be surprised. if they could make a playoff push next year. I mean, I don't say that. I wouldn't say that every year, but I just feel like there are pieces in place where if everything goes the way, the way they finish strong, they started strong and finished strong. May, June, July, August were, or May, June, and July were obviously, pretty miserable months for the team. But when they called up a lot of those young guys in August and September, I think you started to see a glimpse of what the future is like. And you got young pieces, Jared Triolo. I mean, you put that guy anywhere on the field, and defensively, he's going to be
Yeah.
one of the better players in Major League Baseball. Key Brian Hayes. I mean, you don't need to say two words about how good his defense is. That guy, he could win 10 Gold Gloves. He's the best defensive player I've ever seen in my entire life, and I can't even remember like a close second to how good Key Brian Hayes is playing defense. If Reynolds can, get close to what he did in 2021, that's going to drive his team a long way. And you pick up a couple, if you make a couple additions and they pan out, I just think, teams could catch fire. I mean, look at the Baltimore Orioles. A couple of years ago, they lost 100 and they won 100 under the same manager. So I think the model's out there, and I think this team has an idea what they're doing. They really know what they're doing, but they have a chance to really implement their plan now, coming into year 5
Yeah,
of the
I
Shelton
definitely need
cherry
to
tomato.
add some pieces to the rotation. Hopefully, we're going to see some of that in the winter meetings coming up next week. But I wanted to change a little bit on this. Now, there's been discussion publicly about the RSN situation. We've discussed it on the show, and we won't go into that now. I know that you don't have any information that we're able to go into, but I do want to talk about is how well the Pirates have done ratings wise over the year, despite not having many big name players or playing
Yeah.
consistent winning ball. 2023 saw an in market rise of 71.8% over 2022, but they've had strong ratings year in and year out. What, in your mind, is the reason why the local market has been so supportive of the Pirates over the years?
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, even when they were losing a ton of games, people were still watching. I've tried to explain it to people, and they look at me like I got three heads when I tell them that ratings are pretty damn good. I mean, Pittsburgh is really a spectacular baseball city, and I, believe me, I've been to so many cities where they just don't have the kind of passion that they have here. And if and when the Pirates get good, I mean, people are going to see it. You saw it in 2013. Grant, that was 20 years of misery, let out in one night against the Cincinnati Reds. But still, um,
Yeah.
you look at the ratings from 2013. I mean, I don't know if you can, I don't know if you can track that down, but those ratings were unbelievable. 2015 they won 98 games, rated well, even when they struggle. People still watch, and it's an older fan base, obviously in Pittsburgh. It's not a real transient area. When you talk about like in terms of like like San Diego, Phoenix, or Miami or Tampa, where so many people are from other cities. Um, but like you look at Pittsburgh, you look at St. Louis, you look at Cincinnati. I mean, there are some fans, generational fans, where it's been passed down for decades. And I've always said to people that this is a fantastic, fantastic baseball town. And when this team is good, I mean, they watch, and even when they're not good,
Yeah.
as you've seen, they watch, and it is impressive. We had known I'd gotten like probably about a month into the season when the Pirates started 20-8, and they lost the last game in Washington to end April, headed into May, and our ratings were just like, I mean, we were rating like in the sixes and sevens, which is, I mean, that's
Yeah.
almost top of the league stuff. The Cardinals sixes and sevens. I mean, and they've got maybe the best fan base, in terms of loyalty to their team that I've ever seen in all sports, anywhere, honestly. And it's incredible. And yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's just the reaction I get going around town and how much passion people have. And passion goes both ways. Some people are pissed off, and some people are very happy. I mean, I've seen it all in 11 years. You see how mad people get, and and how much they want to trade everybody. They want to trade the owner down to the equipment guy to everybody. I mean, they want to do everything. And then there's some years where it's like, holy smokes, this is unbelievable. Can they get over the top? So I'm not surprised by any of it. I don't really have a specific rhyme or reason why, Michael, why they watch as much as they do. But as we started seeing what the ratings look like on a day to day basis during the season, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was like, wow, this is incredible. And a 71% increase is
Yeah.
very, very hard to replicate for anybody. And especially, when you know, there was room for growth, obviously, especially on the TV side. But the fact that they watched as much as they
Yeah,
did this year
it
was
had
really,
the
really
6th
impressive.
highest, share, like, local market share in all of MLB.
6, yeah. Yeah, I knew they were close to cracking the top 5. I knew I thought at least for a while, we collectively, like in terms of TV networks and you know, um, in regions, I felt like there was a real chance to crack in the top 5. But that's hard. Like the Yankees had a good, they didn't have a great year, but like certain teams are always up there. The Cardinals are always
Yeah,
up there. The Red Sox are up there. I mean, there's always teams that have fan bases that always will watch, and the
yeah,
Reds had a
Reds were up
really
there.
good year too. So,
I don't have the
so they
list
increased
pulled
as
up
well.
anymore,
Yeah,
but I mean, some teams just have, like, the names and the players
yeah.
that are going to draw fans regardless of whether they're winning or losing. The Pirates don't have that. And being part of an organization for the past 11 seasons, you've seen those highs and lows. The 98 win year in 2015 you mentioned, and a number of 100 loss seasons. But baseball is a slog of 162 games, and each one can be fantastic or abysmal. But somehow, and I'm sure anybody who's watched a game where you've been reporting has seen it, you maintain an upbeat demeanor even in a little brother role with the broadcast team. How do you maintain that energy over the course of the long season?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I mean, you want to be honest with you? Like, we work in the candy store of life. I mean, let's be realistic about this. I mean, I see the comments of people, like bitching about the broadcast or bitching about me and tell me how bad I suck, this and that. But like, I ask questions to baseball players for a living and try to get fans to root for them. And that's a fun job. Like, there are people out there that deal with real life stuff every single day, no matter what, whether it's a job, families, kids, wives, husbands, significant others, whatever it is. Somebody's always dealing with something out there. When they flip a baseball game on, they just want a little break. They want to be entertained for a little bit. And that's our job. And, we get compensated to tell these stories and try to make it as entertaining as we can. So, um, you know, I, I know what it's like to be making $15,000 a year in your 30s while sitting on buses for 15 hours at a time and calling that your broadcast career. Um, and I did it for 2 years doing minor league hockey in Prescott Valley, Arizona. Um, I think I look back to, sitting on a sit up bus. It wasn't even a sleeper bus, sitting on a sit up, excuse me, a sit up bus going from Prescott Valley to Amarillo, Texas. And it takes 15 hours to do a game at the Amarillo Civic Center with 300 people in there Friday and 500 people in there Saturday. And you're making $15,000 a year doing it. When you get a job Major League Baseball, it's pretty easy to be excited no matter what. If you're talking about a last place team in July and August and September, it's still a little bit better than spending 15 hours on a bus making $30,000, $15,000 a year in your 30s. So I think perspective is a big reason why, for me, why it's easy to be energized on a daily basis, no matter what. And like I said before, Michael, I mean, this is the candy store life, man. Like, I mean, these guys are happy to be there, themselves. I mean, guys are fighting for jobs every day. These kids are realizing their dream playing baseball at the highest level. So it's not that hard for me personally, but and I take a lot of enjoyment. I mean, my goal every day is to try to get something that you can't find on the internet. And that's a challenge I embrace every day and trying to dig stuff up. And you're right. And over the course of 162, it can get a little bit monotonous, of course. I mean, I think that's,
Mhm.
I think anyone in baseball will tell you that. But it's still fun. And the other thing too is you never know what the hell you're going to see on a given night. It could be an unbelievably boring game, or you could see a perfect game. And that
Yeah.
is part of the
Now,
thrill that
you've
comes with the
obviously
job.
gotten to speak with a number of players over the years. Some guys making their debuts, some guys who have been more on the veteran side, excluding current players, because I feel a Josh Palacios name drop coming up. Do you have a favorite whom you've spoken with who just always has a really good soundbite, or just always is convivial to speak with.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, there's a ton. Man, there are a ton that stand out. I mean, Joshua Palacios now is such a big personality, such a good guy, and raised well, energetic every day. And what you see on TV is what he is. Like, that's not an act. That's talk to any of his teammates. You'll see what this dude is like on a daily basis, and he is so much fun to be around. Um, he's obviously a lot of fun on the current team, and none of them are bad. Let's be honest. I mean,
Mhm.
some guys don't love doing interviews, but it's part of the job. I mean, it just comes with the territory. It's not. I mean, it's not a rule I made up, not a rule anybody made up. It's just there's just amplified coverage when you get to the big leagues. No matter how good or bad a team is, the big leagues is still the big leagues. And I had a player we were talking one time, and having a behind the scenes look at these players, you really see what goes into it and what it's like and how hard it is to not only reach the big leagues but to remain in the big leagues too. And he walked up to me and we were talking one day, and he said, "You know, you know what they call the worst player in the history of Major League Baseball?" I said, "What's that?" "A big leaguer." And I was like, "That's pretty impressive." So you got to understand perspective to start with. So it's a lot of fun talking to these guys to begin with, and they're excited to be there. Not all of them
Sure.
love doing media, but they're excited to be at the highest level. As to answer your question, the highest or the most fun in terms of players, man. If you look just off the top of my head in Pirates lore, I mean, if you remember, Tony Sanchez was a catcher, was a high pick. I think it was drafted fourth overall. Big league career probably didn't pan out as well as he wanted to, but he was a very entertaining guy to be around. Rick Sofield, former coach, was one of the funniest human beings to ever put a microphone in front of. Um, Ray Searage, former pitching coach, was a fantastic guy to work with. Um, Colt Tucker, Stephen Brault, some big personalities that you get a chance to work with on a daily basis, and where you can really draw out their personalities. The guys I'm kind of drawn to are the ones that are not afraid to be themselves, not afraid to. I don't want to say afraid, not to say that the other guys are afraid because they're not, but certain guys are just quiet. They don't say very much. And it's just not in their DNA to have a big personality on camera. But I would say Cole Tucker, Stephen Brault, Tony Sanchez was a lot of fun. Joshua Palacios right now is, one of the best guys I've been around ever in the game. Um, I'm trying to think back on my time with the Twins. We had some entertaining characters when I was with the Twins as well. So it's been a pretty cool journey. You interview interesting people along the way, dignitaries, celebrities, singers, actors, anybody that shows up at a game, you try to get to have a couple words with them, which is kind of cool. We've had Paul Simon at a Pirates game, interviewed him. We had Chuck D from Public Enemy in September a couple months ago. He was fantastic. I interviewed Ellen DeGeneres one time at Target Field in Minnesota. And before we went on camera, and I had said to her, um, I said, "Hey, I'm sure, Ellen, you've been to a million games before." And she stops and says, "No, it's actually my first baseball game." I'm like, "What?" This was in either 2011 or 2012. And I said, "What do you mean it's your first baseball game? Like, you haven't been to like Dodger Stadium or Angel Stadium and throwing out a first pitch, or New York, Chicago, anywhere?" She said, "No." So we decided to talk about that during the commercial break or the inning before. And I said, "Well, can I just talk to you about that when we go on camera?" And she said, "Absolutely." So she mentions being at her first baseball game, and it ends up on the front page of Yahoo, not sports, but yahoo.com. So I wake up the next day, and I probably had 25, 30 messages from people just looking at the video clip. And that was kind of neat. Um, so yeah, been a lot of cool experiences that aren't limited to
All right.
just
Well, I think
the
that'll probably
baseball
segue
players or
into
the
my last
coaches.
question here. 20-year period working in sports, a lot of big moments. Apparently, also includes interviewing Ellen DeGeneres. What is the most memorable one of your career?
Oh man, shoot.
I mean, either
Good or
way, you've
bad?
seen no hitters that have been against the Pirates.
um,
Combined no hitter last in 2022.
yeah.
Um,
What
it
was
was
the
against the
2022
Reds. It was a
game
combined no hitter,
when
but
we
we
got no
won.
hit? Where were we?
It was in like May or something.
Oh, that's right. Actually, I got a crazy story. Yeah, I remember
Yep.
that. Key Brian Hayes, fielder's choice, won the game. I remember that. I actually got pulled off the air during that game um, because at the last minute, the late great Stan Savran, it was Game 7. The Penguins were playing the New York Rangers, and it's a crazy story. I get a call in the sixth inning from a coworker who was also working. One of our camera guys behind the scenes called me, and I'm like, "Why is he calling me? Like he's in the studio." And he said, "Hey, Stan doesn't feel great. You might need to come over here and host the Penguins." I'm like, "Okay, no problem. Just tell me." And then my boss called me right as the seventh inning stretch was about to hit. Because when no hitters start to progress throughout the game, you start to think to yourself, "Oh man, is this possible? Can this happen?" And the boss called me and said, "Leave immediately. Go home." It was super hot that day. I remember it was a Sunday, and it was just a crazy hot day. And he said, "Go home, freshen up, get a suit on, and get back to the studio as fast as you can without putting yourself at risk." And I ended up hosting the Penguins pregame, intermissions, and postgame that night. And I didn't even end up doing the interview walking off the field that day with Key Brian Hayes. So that was a memorable one. The other one, in terms of big moments, man, I'd have to rack my brain thinking about that. I worked another cool one too in 2011. Francisco Liriano threw a no hitter at Chicago at the White Sox, and that was the first no hitter I'd worked for the team. Actually, it was the only one for my team, and that was pretty cool too. So that one stands out as well. Interviewing him after a no hitter, and there's endless like walk off homers and big moments and stretch runs. There have been a lot of cool ones. Actually, one that stands out in everything, Jim Thome. He hit a walk-off home run against the White Sox at Target Field, and it was we were wearing these bright green jerseys, and I believe it was off Matt Thornton, a relief pitcher, and it was like the highest rated game the Twins had had in I don't even know how long, and it was like just this dramatic home run that he hit. I think it was
Oh, when he was
2010,
chasing 600.
first year at Target Field, and that one was where
Yeah.
he was chasing 600. Yeah. And I wasn't in Detroit. He hit 599 and 600 in the same game, and I was not there. I was off that series, and that was in Detroit. I didn't get a chance to do that. But special moments, I mean, guys making their debuts. The
Yeah.
Drew Maggi story was just so unbelievable past April. I mean, it was just there's so many cool moments that is neat to be a very tiny part of, and to celebrate with some of these guys. Not celebrate, but help kind of draw that emotion out and make people root for them are really the most special ones. So I apologize, I can't name a specific one, but there's just so many interesting and neat ones that stand out that it's
Yeah.
hard to pick
It's
like
one of those
one
things like
single moment.
Moneyball. How can you not be romantic about baseball? But
I know, right? It's just so fun. You never know what you're going to see. I mean, you can have a Drew Maggi who's been in the minor leagues for
yep.
in his 13th year, and you know, crowd goes nuts when he gets his first at bat. It was
Yeah.
crazy,
That was really
crazy.
fun. Well, thanks, Robbie, for jumping on the podcast with me this week. We'll be right back with more from the 412 Double Play Podcast. And I am back. Recapping this past week, Pirates hired Sarah Gels as assistant general manager. She previously was an intern for the Bucks in '09, worked with the Orioles and most recently the Astros in various roles before heading back to Pittsburgh. I don't know what kind of impact this has with regards to the team's approach this offseason, but it's another set of eyes, another voice in the front office. Her team also made some roster moves. Thomas Hatch was granted free agency as he is likely signing a contract to pitch in Japan in the NPB. All the best there. Team did sign some guys too. Catcher Ali Sanchez, whom they previously had on the 40 man for a brief stint last offseason. He signed to technically a major league contract, but it's like a split contract. So I'm not sure exactly how that works out. They also up pitcher Rodri Munez. He was a top prospect in the Braves organization entering 2023. The He's had some serious control issues. Ended up getting waived at the trade deadline. Was picked up by the Nationals. They just waived him this past week as well, and the Pirates picked him up off waivers. It's likely both guys are depth, may or may not stay on the roster all offseason. Just acquisitions for a reason for the D-backs organization all of last year. He did have very strong defensive numbers, a lot of caught stealing. He's been He had slightly above average offense, 108 WRC plus in a very hitter friendly environment in the Pacific Coast League. But Munoz, I think like his ceiling right now is probably a reliever, and he's got to get some fastball and slider, both plus pitches, if he can aim them. But like I said, we'll see what happens on that. Winter meetings kick off on Sunday. May or may not see some Pirates moves. We've been hearing a lot of rumors. For Inside the Bucks basement a couple days ago, going over Charrington's history at the winter meetings. Typically does not make moves, so don't be surprised if nothing happens again. Meetings are where some deals get done. A lot of big deals get done by a lot of teams. Could create groundwork. Maybe happens later in another week or two. Hopefully, we get some fun news, likely some clarity on the RSN situation. We also have a Rule 5 draft, which, that's always going to have some sort of news, good or bad. And the draft lottery, which, of course, the Pirates won last year. They have the 8th best. So we'll see how they do with that. If they win the lottery again. A lot of stuff going on with baseball finally. But that wraps it up. Thank you again to Robby Incmikoski for jumping on with me this week. He has seen a lot in his 15 plus years covering baseball, so it's fun going through those stories with him. You can follow me on all social media at Double Play. Continue watching, listening to the show, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else podcasts are found. Make sure to subscribe so you get notified when we drop our new episodes. And from all of us here at the 412 Double Play podcast, thank you for joining us, and let's go Bucks.